Next thing we're going to talk about is your quadrants and where all your functions are positive, negative, in here. If you notice in quadrant 1, okay, all of your values on your circle were positive. So you had like a positive radical 3 over 2, comma 1/2, positive radical 2 over 2, comma radical 2 over 2, and on and on and on. So all these are positive up here in the first quadrant. In your second quadrant over here, your values were your x was negative and your y was positive. And so if your x is negative, that means your cosine is negative. If your sine is positive, that means your y is positive. So then if you had to find your tangent, you take your y divided by your x, which is positive divided by negative, which gives you negative. And then same thing down here, these are both negative. So your sine and cosine are negative, but if you take a negative divided by negative, that's going to give you tangents positive. And then quadrant 4, x is positive, y is negative, so your sine is negative, your cosine is positive, tangent's going to be negative. So here in quadrant 1, they're all together. Now, the easiest way to remember which ones are positive is a little thingy we like to call ASTC. So in the first quadrant, you have all of the functions are positive. Here in the second one, only sine is. Here in the third one, only tangent's positive. And here in the fourth one, your cosine's positive. So ASTC, it just goes in the order of your quadrants. You could maybe remember that as all students. Ooh, that's nice writing. Take calculus. Hey, yeah. If you can come up with a better one, I'd appreciate it, because that one is just not true, I'm afraid. I've thought of like all students take craps, but that's kind of gross, so we wouldn't talk about that. Anyway, all right, next thing we're going to talk about is actual reference angles. So here, values of trig functions greater than 90 degrees can be determined from corresponding acute angles called reference angles. Reference angles is just an acute angle, theta, formed by a terminal side of x and the horizontal axis. You never draw an acute or a reference angle to your y-axis. Ever, 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 ever. Always goes to the x. Okay? Always goes to the x. To your horizontal. So, what we're going to do here for example 2 is we're going to use reference angles, or we could use reference angles. We'll use reference angles here in a little bit, right after example 2. So I'm not quite sure where I'm going over it now. But anyway, what we have here is we have a given, or we're given that sine of theta is 4/5 and tangent of theta is negative. We need to find cosine of theta and the cosecant of theta. So we need to find these. We know cosecant theta is the reciprocal of sine, so we'll be able to find that one pretty decent. What we're going to do is we're going to have to draw a triangle. And if you notice we have a 4/5 here, our other side probably is going to follow our 3, 4, 5. So we're probably going to have a 3 as our other side, but we need to draw a triangle in the correct quadrant. If sine is positive, it's positive 4/5. So that means that we're either going to use your first quadrant, excuse me, or your second quadrant. But then we also are given that tangent is less than 0, which means it must be in quadrant 2. Because in quadrant 1, it's positive, so we could use quadrant 2. Alright, so let's draw our triangle in quadrant 2. So I'm going to draw a real nice triangle just because I can. So there's this, go over and up, and if we draw in our sides, okay, let's draw in our little triangle, or our little right angle there. We know that if this is our theta right here, then our sine is a 4/5. And you can do the Pythagorean theorem, but you're in quadrant 2. We know this is a 3, 4, 5 triangle. This is a 3 here. But since we're in quadrant 2, and your cosine, your x value is going to be negative. So that's a -3. So now all we do is just find our cosine of theta and our cosecant theta. All this information here tells us how to draw a triangle. If your sine is positive, okay, you have 4 quadrants. If your sine is positive, it's only positive in your first and your second. If tangent's negative, that is only in your second and your fourth. So we have to find the quadrant where both of those work. That would be quadrant 2. So if we have our cosine then, that's our x over our r. So that would be a negative 3/5. And your cosine is the reciprocal of sine. Sine is a 4 over 5, right? 4 over 5. Where your cosecant then is just going to be a 5 over 4. So hopefully drawing a little triangle and then writing out your values, even though they're not on your unit circle, you can still use properties of your unit circle to help draw these out. Hopefully that'll help you with some of your homework problems.